right. Hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone. Welcome to our new live session with Polaron team. Today, we're going to talk about how Poland's history can help you in the pursuit of your Polish citizenship. Today, we have Eva and Maggie who will talk about this matter today. Welcome, Eva and Maggie.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Hi. Welcome, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Today, I have the greatest pleasure of introducing you to someone that many of you would have spoken to. Her name is Maggie. She's also known as Małgorzata, and she will explain everything to do with her name in a moment, I hope. But today, we're going to be talking really about Polish history in the context of Polish citizenship. So Maggie is one of our Polish citizenship specialists. But in case you didn't know, she's also got background in history. And I will let Maggie explain, but she does have a master's degree from Poland. The degree was to do with Poland's history. So this is a passion of hers. And it definitely shines through whenever she talks to clients, the prospective clients, because she can put everything into the context that she kind of learned at university. So Maggie, what's with your name? Tell us firstly, are you Maggie, are you Małgosia, are you Małgorzata?
So my name is Małgorzata, so it is a Polish version of my name. I just made it a little bit easier for English speakers to pronounce my name because everyone is struggling with that. So I'm just being called Maggie in Australia, or I lived in England as well. So people here will know me by this name, but officially I'm still using Małgorzata. It's my heritage. I won't change that. That's my right. Polish name.
And it's a lovely name too. So thank you for that explanation. And tell us, where did you study? What did you study? And why, first of all, why history?
So I studied history on University of Gdańsk, and it was always my big passion. I was always really good with that, remembering stuff. And I think it started when my father started telling me all different stories from medieval ages and stuff like this about Polish army. And I think he did put that interest in me. And yeah, when I graduated my high school, I just decided that's the path to take on. And I'm glad I did. It was amazing time, amazing 5 years. I did learn a lot. And I also had the opportunity to write, for example, my thesis in relation to my grandfather, which had an amazing sentimental value to me as well. And yeah, I think that's it, really.
Okay, thank you. So that really gives us the understanding of why you're so passionate about history, but also about our clients' stories. So when you talk to them, you're able to map it out, that journey that for everybody is a little bit different, I guess, in the historical context. So tell us more about Poland's history, because it's one of the oldest countries in Europe. It's got an amazing, rich history, traditions, but it's also a country that geopolitically it's in a very tough spot. And therefore, I guess between Germany and Russia and Austro-Hungarian Empire and all kinds of permutations of what's happened, it's gone through a lot as a country, and Polish people have gone through a lot as people. So maybe if you could tell us a little bit more about, the basic Polish history, although I'm sure that everybody knows, it'll be really good to get your perspective on it.
Definitely. I could talk about it for hours, but I will try to make it short as much as I can. As you said, Eva, today's Poland really was to understand why Poland is as it is today, you really have to go back 1,000 years back in time. And we do have 1,000 years of Polish recorded history, but you had for almost 500,000 years of human interaction on Polish lands. So it is even older than most people would think of. So you had all different tribes living on Polish lands, and the first Polish ruler, Mieszko I, he reunited them. He also took a Christianity which that opened Poland to Western Europe as well. So we could start to sell things to them, but also liaise with them and stuff like this. The first Polish king was his son, Mieszko's son, Bolesław Chrobry. Poland became a kingdom. We have the first Polish dynasty of Piasts. The greatest king of the Piast dynasty and the last of that dynasty was Kazimierz the Great. And we do have a saying in Polish. It is quite difficult to translate it to English, but basically what he says that this king made Poland wooden, but left it in a brick, which means that Poland developed in a very significant way during his rule period. And he was actually the person which established the first university in Poland. And that was in 1364, which is extremely old university, and it is existing till today. It is in Krakow, Jagiellon University. There is only a few universities in Europe which survived such a long period, so I think it is quite significant. The next dynasty, because Kazimierz the Great, he did not leave any male heir to throne. So the next dynasty was connected with Lithuania. The first king was Władysław Jagiełło. He was a Lithuanian duke, and that also caused the connection which we built with Lithuania for over 400 years. That connection did result in 16th century in building official union between Poland and Lithuania. We have Commonwealth of Poland and Lithuania being established, which is very important. So we have two countries being together. The lands which they had all together, that was the biggest country in Europe at the time.
Right.
We do have also, because 15th century or 16th century really is a golden age for Poland and Lithuania. And Poland was extremely unique at the time because our political system was so much different to this what you had in European countries. So European countries were very often absolute monarchies. So you had really strong position of the king. He was deciding about death and life of his people. Where in Poland we have a noble democratic. So that's something which reminds us more about modern countries rather than Renaissance country at the time. What is very important, and also what many people don't know, Europe at the time was also divided in a religious way. So we have Martin Luther King presenting his 95 Theses and separating from Catholic Church. We have Henrik VIII in England separating from Catholic Church. But Poland is an asylum for all of the religions. So all refugees which were discriminated in European countries come into Poland and they find in their land where they can live peacefully. Poland was also extremely diverse in regards to ethnics. So all different nations were living there. So we have really big community of Polish Jews living in Poland. And also these religions were not discriminated at all. So we have even Muslim religion being placed in Poland where they could just simply live in peace with other people, which I think is brilliant. And it is something which changed in a significant way. And I will tell you later why. But it is a shame it changed.
Right.
I would mention also that in 17th century, Poland went into decline. So there were devastating wars and Poland went a little bit into anarchy, total disorder. And that also caused that surrounding Poland countries, they abused that situation which was happening in Poland. They also didn't like that Poland has this noble democracy system because they were absolute monarchies and it did not look good for them. So they did decide to invade Poland and divide Polish lands in between them. So we have three countries, Prussia, Russian Empire, and Austro-Hungarian Empire, which starting to partition Poland in 1772, and then in 1793 and 1795, they causing that Poland is disappearing from maps. So Poland is stopped to exist at all. So there is no country. You still have Polish people living on these lands, but you don't have Poland. Poland tried to rebel. We tried to rebel. We have first constitution in Europe being established. It's second after US in the world, and that was in 1791. But unfortunately, it did not help too much. We had several uprisings, and unfortunately, there was no hope for Poland to receive their independence, which is very important for that period for citizenship point of view. Poland is not existing till 1918. So you won't be able to have Polish passports. You won't be able to have even Polish birth certificate. You don't have Polish institutions. So you won't, in a way, trace documentation proving that your ancestors were Polish. We have to understand that Polish people were still living on their lands. So you still have culture, art, science developing. We have Marie Skłodowska-Curie, yes, which is getting her to Nobel prizes, or we have Frederick Chopin. So we have a lot of people, Polish people, which still trying to develop the country in that economical sort of way, but we still don't have structures. The First World War, that was something which Poland seen as a hope, as a chance, and not only Poland, because we have Czech Republic, Slovakia, Lithuania, all these countries of the Middle Europe seen First World War as a chance to get their independence, and it did happen. It did happen in 1918. Poland is receiving its independence, and finally we have our country back. The problem is that we were not existing for 123 years. So how to reboot the country where it's so not united, so divided, all different parties having all different vision for Poland, so many different people living in Poland as well. Another thing is that borders of the Poland were completely different to this what we have at the moment. So they were including massive chunks of today's Ukraine, Belarus, or Lithuania. For example, Vilna, which is capital of Lithuania, belonged to Poland. So Poland still kept its diversity, cultural diversity, or ethnical one, but in a way, it is a little bit in a chaos, and they did not manage in a way to put it all together, and Nazi Germany did attack Poland, and we are again in the state of war, and again our country is being ruined. Many cities, like for example Warsaw, 90% of the city was ruined with ground completely. So it is that period is also really important for our citizenship, because most of our customers is coming, their ancestors coming from that kind of period. So after the war, so many Poles were displaced. About 6 million Poles were completely perished. So many was sent to Siberia, so many was sent to all different concentration camps, forced labor in Germany. I can even say my grandfather, as a 12-year-old boy, was sent to Germany to work on a farm, and he was displaced after the war. And he did had a chance, because after the war, people in displaced camps, they were usually given a choice. So do you want to go back to Poland, Canada, US, Australia, where do you want to go? And he did decide to go back to Poland, lucky for me. But that was the situation during the war. Very troubled time, of course. And there is practically, 3 million Polish Jews perished in concentration camps. So extremely tragic, and it is in a way sometimes difficult maybe to speak to customers. Sometimes I have a chance to speak to their ancestors, because it is so traumatic for them that it is very difficult subject, and you have to be quite sensitive with in asking questions. But I do understand.
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say there, Maggie, that's why we love working with you, because you're not only very passionate, but also very knowledgeable. And that sensitivity that you were talking about, and the way that we talk to people, especially if the ancestors are still alive, because many of them would be in their 80s or even 90s, it requires a lot of diplomatic skills, I guess. But I think what you painted, which I find absolutely fascinating, is a history and a spirit of people that, the country that's 1,000-year-old has gone through many transformations. There were better periods, there were worse periods, there were turmoil. Our neighbors wanted a chunk of us. And also, after the war, we were not really treated that well, actually, because what happened was that once we were not a republic of USSR, we were effectively under USSR control.
Yeah.
And so many people like your grandfather returned to Poland, but many more didn't, for political reasons or religious reasons and all kinds of reasons. So these are the people whose ancestors we work with now, and many of them have the history really patchy, I guess, or it's just what happened. People had to escape, or they were taken as slave laborers, or they ended up in camps. And because they couldn't return to Poland because the borders were shifted or whatever, they immigrated. And that would be primarily people that you'd be working with.
Definitely.
And you did mention there a couple of things that are really important when we explain that to people, that the difference between citizenship, nationality, heritage, and origins, even though it kind of means the same thing, is very big. So prior to 1918, there was no Polish citizenship because there were no Polish administration. So people may have felt Polish and they spoke the language, and they certainly identified as Polish, but there's nothing that we can do to prove that. And that is why anybody whose ancestors left before that are going to struggle to get citizenship through descent. But what I was going to ask you, Maggie, now is about Polish archives, because what we often hear from people is, everything's destroyed in Poland and there's nothing available. How true is that?
So no, that's absolutely not true. Well, I did mention Warsaw, that it was completely ruined with Grant, and yeah, it can be a little bit challenging to find documents in Warsaw, but I think our girls in Poland are very often surprised how many documents is still available. So as much it can be a challenge, it is still possible. So in a way, it is something which we can still do and check their records if they are there. In relation to other lands of the Poland, for example, if we're speaking about southern borders of Poland, Krakow, that region was not damaged practically at all, because they were in a way sort of way protected. So and the same really with Gdańsk region of the northern Poland, because you did had Germany, when they attacked Poland, they incorporated their lands to Germany, so they were not damaging their lands. So because of that, I don't think the statement that they had damage is right. It's not that hard. It can be challenging to research them in Ukraine or Belarus, but challenging that way that it will be time consuming, because they might have a little bit different archival procedures to this what we have in Poland. So it can be just a little bit of a struggle to communicate with them, but we do also have Ukrainian native speakers. So yeah, we're just trying to work around that, but documents are there. It is just a matter of knowing where to access them, because you don't have one archive which will centralize all archives. So you have to access archives in all different villages, towns.
And manually too, because they have to search through the books and
exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's fair to say that it's not that the documentation doesn't exist, but what the challenging bit is for our clients to tell us who their ancestors are, where they come from, their proper name. Sometimes they don't even know the spelling, or if it's a city called Wielka Wieś, there's like 1,000 of them in Poland. So we actually need to know which one, because we can't access this information centrally. So we have to be pretty precise in how we manage that information in order to find things. So, you know, the information might be there, but we need to be able to find it. Yeah.
I would maybe also mention that with that details, very often during the war, especially younger children, they were making themselves a little bit older just to escape concentration camps. So very often they would give a little bit different date of birth, or very often they would like to hide their Jewish background. So they would change their last name as well. So it is very important for us to establish what name they were using before the war and what name they were using after the war. In a way, we have to know both, because we have to identify them in archives.
So both you and I know that we've had cases where a person may have had 20 different names, 57 different dates of birth, and 887 different stories. What is the most challenging case you've ever worked on, and why do you say that?
The most challenging
interesting.
Or interesting. The most interesting, definitely I don't have doubts about it. I was speaking with a customer. He sent me his family tree, and I look at this family tree and I recognize the name of his grandmother. And I was like, oh, I know this. So I started researching, and it turns out that I did actually put her story or use her memories in my thesis for master's degree. Wow. And you know, when I was writing that thesis, I was reading so many all different stories, memories, and in a way, I do feel like I know these people because they did share that private story with me. So in a way, I felt like I know her, and now I'm speaking with her grandchild. So it was absolutely amazing, and I do feel very privileged also to have a chance to do that, because what's the chance in the world? Amazing.
That would happen, And the other interesting thing, of course, is that we are now in Australia. The client I think you're talking about is American.
Yes.
The grandma's still alive and she lives in Warsaw. So we live in such a global, fascinating world that you know, the stories that we are very privileged, really, to have them, to hear them. And we're also very protective of the stories, I guess, and very sensitive to them, so that we can take people along that journey. So we often say, you know, and also during these webinars, that people don't work with us to get a passport. A lot of them work with us to get access to their heritage and to the information, and it's such a privilege for them as well to discover all these things. And you know, so many times, I'm sure you can confirm that we discover the grandfather's name that the family never knew, because the person may have used a variety of names, or the proper date of birth, and then we discover that somebody celebrated all their lives their birthday on the wrong date, or they had siblings, or because you mentioned earlier on that people were very traumatized during the war. You know, and in those days there were no supports, there were no services, people were just meant to get on with life. And that is a challenge of how to handle that, and what to get out of that information that's useful for citizenship. But Maggie, what makes you happy at work? Tell us, because we've got a number of questions and people are dying to ask you questions. So we do need to wrap up. Beloved, it has been 25 minutes nearly that we've been talking. It's just amazing. Thank you. All right, did I tell you? Yeah, I told you it's going to go really fast. So tell us, what makes you happy at work, and then we go on to some questions.
Definitely speaking with customers, and then when they send in documentation, I'm looking at it also not only from the citizenship point of view, but from my sentimental historian point of view. And it is such an amazing thing to be able to speak with these people, because you could read thousands of Polish history books. There is nothing like the relation of the person which actually did experience that. So it is amazing that I have chance to do that on a daily basis. So from the historian point of view, there is nothing better.
Right, because it allows you to sort of leave I guess the history that you've learned through books or through studying, and all of a sudden you have an opportunity to to actually talk to the people that have gone through this incredible events and this incredible trauma. And as I said earlier, we're very privileged to be working with you because you have, all this background, and you're able to put it in the context for us that really helps us with our work. I'm going to hand over to Andrea for questions now.
Yes, we would like you guys to now answer some of the questions from the audience. So the first question from Patrick: if our ancestors were born in the 1890s in Austro-Hungarian Empire, but the area is now Poland or Ukraine, does that give us chance at citizenship to Austria-Hungary?
I'm assuming that Patrick's asking whether he's eligible for Polish citizenship. And the answer to that question is maybe. So there's a couple of considerations there that are a little bit difficult to explain. But if a person was born before 1901, which is in the case 1890, it depends what year they left Poland. So it's, being born somewhere is not the same as being a citizen. So Poland doesn't have what they call the law of soil. They have the law of blood, and it's citizenship through descent. So what we would have to find out from Patrick is what year they actually left Poland, because even if his ancestors were born in the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, if they were living in Poland in 1918, or more precisely 1920, when the first laws were established, then yes, he would be eligible. But we need to look at it in the context of when they left, when they naturalized. There's all kinds of things that we would need to look at. So unfortunately, I cannot give you a precise answer other than to say possibly. I know it's not helpful.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you, Maggie. So we have another question regarding processing time. So how much time should we expect for archive and researches being done with governments in Poland and Ukraine with this current situation with the coronavirus, and many offices having been closed? So what happens if there's a lot of manual research within the government archives, and we know some offices are being closed, or many people working from home?
Yeah, so the thing that the offices are closed, or the governments are closed, is a bit of a myth. They're closed to the public, but they are still working. So they are also working from home. And there are some delays in how those requests are processed, but nothing significant. We're not noticing any massive delays because behind the scenes, people are still working, both in Ukraine and in Poland and everywhere else. What we're not able to do at the moment is do manual searches. So, the archivists cannot go into the books or registers and check things manually because a lot of them are working from home. So as far as timelines, on average, it takes 45 days to get documentation in Poland. And that's not really delayed much at all. Like, we've not noticed any delays or any disruptions. Where the difficulties might lie as far as timelines is where we're looking for something specific, and the archivists are not in the office because they're working from home. And with Ukraine too, we're getting responses as we usually do. Having said that, Ukraine is slow already, so it takes 3 to 6 months is an average sort of timeline there.
We still have another question. After the independence of Poland in 1918, did further border changes occur? If so, does the Polish government still recognize those that might have been excluded from Poland because of these changes as citizens of Poland today?
I might let Maggie answer that because there's no better expert. Go for it.
I'm glad you did. So borders between the wars, between 1918 and 1939, did change slightly. So, for example, Wilno was actually incorporated to Poland in 1920. But still the region was in a way still being considered as Poland. Even before that, there is a little bit of an argument between Lithuania and Poland how it was, but it was part of Poland. And these borders which we have established, let's call it in 1920, because legislation was established at the time as well. So we have to look at the Poland at that time, how it looks like. So if your ancestors were living in Polish borders in 1920, then you do have a quite big chance to become a Polish citizen. And after 1945, borders changed again. We did got quite big chunk of the East lands, and then we lost these bits of Ukraine and Belarus. And it is very important to know that even that your ancestors could live in Ukraine between the wars, that region is no longer Poland, but you still have a chance. So it would not disqualify you from the process. You can still apply because they were living in Poland between the wars.
And this is where a bit of a grey area comes in, I guess, and what I mentioned earlier about nationality, origins, heritage, and citizenship is not always very clear. And when the application is submitted to the Polish government might sometimes have a lack of clarity around what that means, because Poland was, in fact, very diverse before the war. There was 3.2 million Jewish people, but there were also other nationalities like Germans. There was, some cities, about half of the population were German. And then we even have Tatars. There's 30,000 people of Tatar background who are Muslims in Poland, and lots of Ukrainians. So to reach that clarity, the only thing we can do is put the application through to the Polish government, and they will tell us whether basically if you've gained Polish citizenship or not. And sometimes they might form an opinion that we don't agree with, and we'll argue for you, of course, and try and get you through. But it's how that legislation is applied and how it's interpreted, I guess, is the big question. And that's sometimes unpredictable. So I'd say that 80% of our cases, we have total clarity, and about 20% of cases we don't. And sometimes we discover things as we go along that we didn't know, the families didn't know, and then you have to deal with the whatever the information we get.
All right, I think we can take one more minute to answer to one last question, guys.
Sure.
So we have a good feedback from Patrick and also a question. So he's telling Maggie and I have been talking about my ancestry. It has been so wonderful, so fabulous to work with. So the question will be, in regards to other empires that owned the land when my ancestors were born in the 1890s, Austria and Hungary, do those nations, he means Austria or Hungary, not Poland, give out citizenship by descent or something similar?
I'll step in there, Patrick, and I'll hand over to Maggie shortly, but the answer is probably not. I mean, Poland's got an incredibly flexible and liberal legislation compared to other countries. So, for example, Germany and Austria, until today, I guess it's fair to say that they're very protective of citizenship. And if you're in doubt, the answer is probably no, because depending on your religion, and like in Germany, for example, in 1938, in Austria, Jewish people were stripped of citizenship. So often people might think, okay, well, my family comes from an area that's now, let's say, Germany. And when we start looking into the cases, mostly we discover that they never held German citizenship. So over to you, Maggie. I think you might want to contribute to this and then wrap up for us. But before we do, I wanted to thank you very much. I just like Patrick, I really enjoyed our little session. So thank you very much for sharing. And over to you, Maggie.
I will mention also, Patrick, thank you so much for such a good feedback. It was a pleasure to have a chat with you as well. And I know which Patrick we're talking about. So
you can't hide from us.
Yes, so I will get in touch with you today as well, so just so as you know. And so thank you very much for listening. And do you want me to say something else, Eva? Would you like me to?
I just wanted to see if you've had any experience with people that were born in the 18th century, I guess, and whether there's ever any overlap between citizenship. So I guess what Patrick's asking is whether if you do not qualify for Polish citizenship, is there a chance that you might qualify for Austrian or German?
So In relation to that, if your ancestors were living in Austro-Hungarian Empire, they could still in a way identify Polish. So it would mostly depend from a documentation. And like Eva mentioned, Austria and Hungary have quite strict citizenship laws. So I think if your ancestors did not rise in the United States, and I think that was the case with Patrick, I think they, even if, assuming they would have the Austrian citizenship, I think they would lost it. We do have an Austrian specialist, Nadia, which is based in Germany, so I could double check with her, but I'm almost certain that would be the case. But also we have to remember, Patrick, that we assuming that your ancestors were Polish, so if documents would state in a way they were identifying Polish, Austrian government could turn back and say, no, they are Polish, you have to apply with Polish government. So I think that's very much the case.
Yeah, and I think it's also fair to say that unless a decision and until a decision is issued by the government, we can only guess. So this case that Patrick's describing here is quite complex. It's not unusual. There are many people, millions of people in the same situation. But, you know, just from experience, it also depends what people identify themselves with as far as their ethnicity or nationality. And it's not the same as citizenship. So I know I've said it a number of times before, but it is a bit of a grey area, and we're more than happy to talk to people individually if they have any specific questions. In the meantime, Maggie, thank you so very much. That was amazing, fascinating. Thank you. Any questions anybody has, you know where Maggie is. She's in our Melbourne office and very responsive, always very friendly. You can call, you can email, and she will know. That would be very helpful. And anybody wants to talk to me, they can as well. So for now, thank you, and we'll see you next week, everyone. We will be talking about pricing of citizenship next week, which is a topic that will get a lot of interest, I'm sure. And we'll be talking to our financial director, Dominic. Any questions about that, you can send them to Andrea ahead of time. In the meantime, Maggie, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure. Bye.